Great to be joined by another great hockey coach in the ECAC, Keith Allain. This is a huge edition of ECAC Hockey Decision Makers. Coach, thank you for joining us.
Pierre, it's always a pleasure to see you and reminisce about hockey and some old stories. So good to see you, man.
We're going to have some fun with this. I miss seeing you on the road. I love watching your teams play. I know you have a certain identity in terms of how you coach. You were a goalie. I want to first find out. You grew up in a house in Worcester, Mass. You got, 6 people, I think, brothers. 5 of them play college hockey. Is that why you ended up being a goalie?
I've got 6 brothers, actually, and I ended up being a goalie. We were 10 or 11. My dad was our coach. My dad's an immigrant from Moncton, New Brunswick, and hockey in his blood. And our goalie quit, and nobody wanted to play goalie. And I was his son, so I was the only one he could make play goal. And then the way it worked back then, our youth program had a travel team, and I could make the travel team as a goalie, and I couldn't make it as a forward. And I liked the idea of being on the travel team, so. That's kind of why I stuck it out.
So your dad was a professional hockey player, played in the old Eastern League, correct?
Yeah, I don't know if they consider that professional back then.
Oh yeah, you got a paycheck. They consider that pro. You grew up in a hockey house. I have a hockey house. You have a hockey house. You've got a son that plays. I've got a son that plays. How much did it mean to you to be coached by your father?
My father taught me so many wonderful lessons about being a man, about having a family, and many of those lessons were given to us at the hockey rink. But I think the biggest lesson about hockey that my dad taught me, and all my brothers and all the guys on the team, because he didn't just teach the Allain boys, was to love the game, to respect the game. And like anything else in life, if you're going to do it, give it all you have.
I love the mentorship side of this. That's what I try to do with my son, Ryan. You've coached against my son. I've watched your son, Nick, play forever since he was at Mid-Fairfield. So it's kind of cool to see it come full cycle. I got to ask you this. You're recruited by a guy that I had so much respect for, the late, great Tim Taylor. You played for him. You knew him unbelievably well. Give me a great Tim Taylor story. I got a bunch from having coached against him and known him. Give me a great Tim Taylor story.
I mean, you're putting me on the spot here because there are so many great Tim Taylor stories. But I think the one that just kind of encompasses, I'm back as a coach at Yale. My wife was my girlfriend at the time. And so after a game, we'd go out to dinner, have a pizza and a beer. And we think that we're talking about life, and Timmy gets the salt and pepper shaker, and okay, this is Bobby Burke, and this is Mark Crear, and this is what we should be doing on the power play, and this is 60 minutes after we just played a game, but that was Timmy. He was on all the time.
He really was, and people don't realize not only was he a great coach, he was a great man, right? He really helped educate. You talked about learning at the hockey rink. I think he thought the bench was a classroom, the dressing room was a classroom, and the rink was a classroom. Is that fair to say?
Oh, he was the classic teacher coach. It's right on to say. And he, I think all of us that had the opportunity to play for him feel that way. And he was also unique in the sense that all of us that had the opportunity to play for him have different experiences. His relationship with Keith Allain isn't the same as his relationship with Danny Poliziani was, or any other guys on the hockey team. Timmy was amazing that way.
You talked about your wife and going for pizza and beer with Tim after a game. You met your wife in Sweden, am I correct?
That is correct.
And how does a goalie, and it was hard for import goalies to play over in Europe in those days, because I played over in Europe. I wasn't a goalie, but I know how hard it was for goalies. How'd you get to Väsby, Sweden?
Well, it's an interesting story, actually. You're right. There were very few imports of any color, any position over there, particularly goalies. But I had always said that I wanted to play in Europe. I wanted to continue to play after I graduated. And my senior year, second to last game of the year, we're playing at Brown. And the president of this team in Väsby was coming over to watch Brown's goalie, a guy named Mark Holden, who was a Montreal Canadiens draft.
Yep.
I mean, he was with a gentleman that I knew, Smokey Cerrone, who did some scouting for the New York Rangers, and his son played with me.
Brian Lawton, David Quinn and Brian Lawton are two of his biggest picks.
Yep. And so she's at the game with Smokey, and I had a really good game. And Yanni Carlson's the gentleman's name from Sweden. He said, "Well, I like that Yale goalie." Smokey said, "Well, I know him too." And they called me after the game, and we met, and one thing led to another, and I ended up in Sweden.
Coach, is it fair to say that night may have changed your whole trajectory hockey-wise?
Oh, it changed my whole trajectory hockey-wise, life. I met my wife.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it gave me a unique experience in hockey. There's no question that night changed my life in so many wonderful ways.
What's different about playing on big ice for a goalie compared to playing on small ice?
Well, I think that the biggest thing is the offensive players have more time and space, and the defenses have to respect that. You know, so as a goalie, and you're reading the play, and it's approaching you, right? And it's okay. What are the shooter's options, and how much pressure does he have? Well, he doesn't have the kind of pressure that he has over here, and lots of times his option is to pass rather than shoot. So you have to learn to be more patient. You know, as a goalie in North America, you could read the pressure, you could get out, you could cut down the angle, and 90% of the time, this guy's going to shoot the puck. Where over there, it's 50-50 whether he shoots or not. And if you get out too far, his teammates tapping it into an open net. So it takes a real adjustment positionally, you know, where you're standing in the net.
Because we hear about that a lot. You know, obviously, Sweden, most of the rinks are 200 by 100. In Finland, they've got the hybrid rink. In Russia, they're actually shrinking the rinks to North American size. Yeah. But I've heard that so much. And that's why I wanted to ask you that, because you look at all the great, there have been a lot of great goalies from Sweden, as you know, a lot of them. Henrik Lundqvist, he had no problems making the adjustment from big ice to small ice. Is there a reason why? He was one of the first guys that I could say there was no issue.
Yeah, well, I mean, and if you look at Henrik's game, I think, again, I don't know Henrik, so I'm outside looking in. You know, the one thing you learn is the rink's the same from the dots in, right? You know, it's wider on the outside. Henrik's style, he plays a little deeper in the net than traditional North American goalies did, so he didn't have to change that too much when he came. And then, you know, in New York, he had Benny Allain, who's one of the best goalie coaches in the history of goalie coaches. So I think Henrik had this thirst to be great, right? And so you put a teacher together with a student who has a thirst to be great, and oftentimes good things happen.
One of the cool things, and I can share this with you, is when I was coaching in Hartford, you were an assistant coach with the Washington Capitals, and I think you still had Terry Murray, right, to start, and then you moved to Jimmy, right? Jimmy Schoenfeld?
Yep. Exactly.
So I got to ask you this, Keith, like, how is it you're not a position player, you're a goalie. You're not a defenseman, you're not a winger, you're not a center. Not too many guys in your position were coaching in the NHL in that type of position. How hard was it to get through to the players?
Well, you know, it's interesting, Pierre, because, you know, I started in Washington in 93, and I was scouting for them while I was coaching in Sweden. Mm-hmm. And there were a couple of times where Jack Button, who was our assistant GM, he's the guy who hired me, a wonderful man. And Jack asked me to come to Washington as the goalie coach. And both times I said no, because I was afraid that if I came to the NHL as a goalie coach, I'd be pigeonholed as a goalie coach and would never have an opportunity to do anything else. And then a year after the Olympic team in 92, they asked me to come to Washington as an assistant coach. So that's how I ended up in that role. In terms of dealing with players, I think I learned early on that if you can show the guys that you can help them get better. And that was my focus as a coach, still my focus as a coach. I want to help you be the best version of yourself. And if they believe that you can do that, then they'll listen to you. You got to develop, it takes time to develop that trust. And it takes a lot of work from the coach's standpoint to be able to develop that level of knowledge to be able to help these guys. But it works.
I'm glad you brought up the 92 Olympic team. I was coaching in Pittsburgh when you guys were on your caravan and you came through, and pretty good team back in those days in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, that was the year Bob got sick, right?
Yeah, Bob got sick in 91 after we won the Cup in 91, and then Scotty and I took it over in 92. So, but we were all together there in 91. But my question for you is, there were so many good players on that 92 team that were just starting to get good. Is there one in particular you remember, like, oh, I knew that guy was going to be great?
Well, first of all, were a number, because we were one of the last Olympics where you couldn't use NHL players, or so we were taking college seniors for the most part, or guys that were a year or two out of college. But Keith Kachuk is probably he was one of our youngest guys on our team.
Yeah.
And I can remember getting to Washington, and he was a Winnipeg draft, and telling Terry, this kid's going to score 20 goals and get 200 minutes and penalties this year. And he said, no, he's not. I said, oh, yes, he is.
He will.
Yeah. Yes, he is. And but there were a number of guys that had really good careers, but Keith's one that jumped out at me.
Yeah, the big thing about Keith is I'll never forget his draft year was 1990. We took Jaromir Jagr with the 5th pick overall, but Keith went late, I think 18 or 19 to Winnipeg. And the only reason he went that late is because he got hurt.
He had an ankle injury.
Yeah, and the guy that drafted him was Joe Yannetti. And Joe knew him because he had coached against him when Joe was at St. John's Prep. So that it just shows you how crazy the business can be. It's almost like when you met your wife over in Sweden.
Yeah,
it's the same kind of stuff. One night can change everything. One of the best Keith Allain stories I have, and I've never shared this with you, the 2011 World Juniors in Buffalo. You're the head coach of Team USA. Your team plays great during the regular part of the tournament, and you guys had the bitter disappointment of losing to Canada in the semifinal. You probably don't remember this, but I went up to you and I congratulated you because I was broadcasting the event on how well you had prepared your team. And the next day before the bronze medal game, you worked your guys' tails off before they played Sweden in the bronze medal game. And I said to you, wow, that was a hard part. You go, no, this is like our gold medal game now. We're going to win this. And you did. And you did. What made you think that all that hard work before the bronze medal game would certify that you would be the bronze medal winning game or team that day?
Having been through these things, the 92 Olympic team, okay, we had a really nice run. It was almost magical. And then we lost to, it was called the Unified Team, but it was Alex Kovalev's Russian team.
Yeah.
In the semifinal game. So we were playing the Czechs for the bronze medal. And I think all of our guys, maybe it's part of being an American, we were checked out. The bronze medal didn't mean anything. We didn't have a chance for gold. And guys were signing autographs in the locker room, and we were packing up because now guys are going to say goodbye the next day and go to one team or the next. And I was always disappointed in myself as a coach that I didn't, when the Czechs won that bronze medal, the sticks and gloves are in the air, and it was the most exciting thing that they could have done. And I realized that, as a coach, I missed an opportunity to get my players to realize that, hey, winning a bronze medal on the world stage is a big deal. And so I, vowed if I ever got in that position again, I would not let my team take that game for granted. And it happened in 11 at the World Junior.
Do you remember that practice, though? How hard?
Oh, yeah. I remember that practice. There may have been a little anger on me, too, because I didn't love the way we played against Canada in that semifinal game. So
here's what I got to ask you, though. How cool is it? Because I've been to so many, as you have. How cool is it to stand on the ice when your anthem's being played to celebrate a medal victory?
Nothing better. And I'll take that one step further, Pierre. It's not even the medal. Like, in those tournaments, every game you win, you stand on the bench and they play your anthem. And that feeling, and that was in Buffalo, but I've had the pleasure to do that in a foreign country, and it's even more special. And it's just it's a great feeling as an American, or I probably for anyone on any country.
I agree with you 100%. I remember watching the Finns win in 2004, the bronze medal game against the Russians. Ovechkin was on that team. Malkin was on that team. It was an amazing Russian team. And it's the first time the Americans won gold. And I remember watching the Finns celebrate their bronze. And, you're broadcasting the game. Like, I'm not going to start crying. But there's a tear that comes down because you're seeing the emotion, and you're like, whoa, this is amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's unbelievable. I love what you just said, Coach. One of the best moments I have about a Keith Allain story is watching your team beat Quinnipiac in 2013 in Pittsburgh, my old stomping grounds, to win the national championship. You got to have a bazillion memories from that. Is there one key one that you'll never forget?
Never forget. It's funny. Like, you're right. There are a million memories, but when we scored the goal to go up 4-0. It was about 4.5, 5 minutes left. And I just looked up and I saw my daughters in the stands, my daughters and my son, Nick. And they were like going crazy. And I just remember going like, settle down. This game's not over yet. We got, but also with that team. And, we talk about how much good fortune you need in life, like how me getting an opportunity to go play in Sweden we won 6 games in overtime that year. And we lose any one of them, we don't make the tournament. It's not like we don't make the tournament. And we won 2 games in overtime in the tournament. And I thought and the other great memories I had is it was an upset, right? We were a 15 seed. We beat, but I felt like we were the better team in every game we played. It wasn't like that it was a miraculous win. I thought we played our game. We played it well, and we played it well for 60 minutes in every game we played.
It reminded me so much. I didn't want to put this forward before you answer. It reminded me so much of the 93 Montreal Canadiens that won the Stanley Cup. They won 10 games in overtime to win the cup. And Patrick Roy was obviously huge in that, and you would appreciate that as a former goalie. But what I remember the most about that 2013 Yale team, you talk about, you had to win all these tight games. You were the hardest team in the country. You were physically the hardest team in the country. How do you create that environment as a coach?
I wish I knew that answer would be a little harder right now with Yale. But I do agree with you. I mean, it starts with the people you recruit and the people you get in your program. And then, as coaches, we're always trying to reinforce habits each and every day. And you're never going to get 25 hard guys, but if you get 12 hard guys, they can bring a few other guys on and get them to play a little bit harder. But it's not an easy task. And it's when you are hard, you're going to be successful.
You talked about the opportunity to coach your son, Nick. How hard is it to do that? How great is it to do that? What's it like at the dining room table if dad or coach has to make a bad or tough decision involving his son?
That's a complicated question. I'll tell you, I was scared to coach Nick. My assistant coach was recruiting him to Yale, and I certainly wasn't going to deny him the opportunity to play hockey at Yale and get a Yale education. But I was worried about it. And the beauty of it is he was a 20-year-old freshman. He wasn't a boy. He was a man. And he made it easy for me. The way he came to the rink each and every day, the way he became a member of the hockey team. And looking back on it, I wish I had relaxed and enjoyed it more because of his work, his approach, the kind of person he is, probably thanks to his mother. It really wasn't that hard at all. Never. And now I miss him. He's not in our team now, and I miss him every day.
I had a chance to watch it for 4 years. I thought you guys handled that so well. It blew me away how well you guys handled that as a family, but as a coach to a son or a father to a son, I thought it was really tremendously well done. I salute you on that.
The credit is his.
What's that?
The credit is his.
I agree. Coach, I had the chance to call one of my son's games this weekend. Northeastern was at UMass. It's the first time I ever broadcast one of his games. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, do I rip him when he makes a mistake or do I praise him when he does something well? I never called him by his first name. And the reason why I did that is because I watched Bob Greasy call college football games when his son played at Michigan. And his son was a quarterback. And he never once called his son by his first name. He always said, Greasy did this one. Greasy was no good there. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do that. I'm going to take it from the late Bob or the great Bob Greasy. So that's how I did it. You won the Tim Taylor Award numerous times, which is Coach of the Year in the ECAC. When you win that, what does something like that mean to you about the memory of one of the guys who was clearly one of your mentors?
first of all, and you know this, anytime you win a Coach of the Year award, it's a group award, right? It's your assistant coaches and it's your players. If your players aren't playing well, you're not going to win anything. But to have the award named after Timmy means so much to me. Like I mentioned, my dad, Pierre, like there are three coaches in my life that had a huge impact on me. And my dad taught me to love the game and respect it. Timmy taught me how to organize my thoughts about the game and see patterns in the chaos of hockey. And then the other guy was Dave Peterson, and Coach Pete taught me how to trust your players and let them play. And then so Timmy is one of the great influences in my life, and to have an award with his name on it means more than I can articulate here.
What people don't realize about the ECAC is there's a pantheon of great coaches. Timmy Taylor is one of them. Billy Clear is another one. Mike Gilligan, Eddie Jeremiah. You can go to Joey Marsh, who I had the honor and privilege of working for. Billy O'Flaherty at Clarkson. Jerry York, who's in the Hockey Hall of Fame. I can go on and on. Lou Lamoriello before there was Hockey East. Jack Parker. Like ECAC hockey, the legendary Parker now.
Oh,
you're part of that group. How do you feel about that?
I've never thought about it that way. I'm sitting here and you're naming those names and I'm thinking, well, I know Lou Lamoriello and I know Jackie Parker and they know me by name and I work with Timmy and I know Mike Gilligan and I know Billy O'Flaherty and I know Joey Marsh, and I'm just feeling privileged that I know these people. So I don't see myself in that group. I'm glad that I've had a chance to interact with them.
Well, you're in the pantheon with those guys, and there's more than that. And I don't even, one of our guys who we used to have to recruit against, Herbie Hammond, Bobby Gaudette. I can go down the line. Like, you and I used to be on the road. Danny Poliziani, one of your old running mates. Like, I can go down the line. It's an amazing thing. It's one of the parts of the ECAC that doesn't get enough credit. There's so many great coaches over time that have come out and been developed in the ECAC. Mm-hmm. And made their whole life in it. You chose to make your life in the ECAC.
Mm-hmm.
You happy you did?
Yes, I am happy I did. Very happy I did. I'm happy. I think lots of coaches get to college hockey, young coaches, and they're thinking about what's next. And boy, I'd like to get to the NHL. And sometimes I miss the NHL when playoffs come around. But I'm happy that I had an opportunity to work in the NHL and then come back to Yale, where my focus was just being the Yale hockey coach. I wasn't looking for my next job. I wasn't worried about my next job. I just wanted to be good at this.
Coach Cleary was like that at Harvard. I think Coach Taylor was like that. I think he had numerous offers to go to the NHL. He chose not to. I know Coach Marsh had opportunities to go, and he stayed. And I have so much respect for that. I was in a different situation. I was an assistant coach that, got hired by the winningest coach in the history of the NHL. It was tough for me at that point to stay. I probably would have stayed had it not been for him. But I watched so many ECAC games on the women's side and the men's side. And to me, I can't believe the growth of the league, the intensity of the games week in and week out. Do you feel like the league's improved? Do you feel like that intensity is always there?
I think it's always there, and I think the quality of the league is high. I think I think the quality of the league was really high. From 2010 to COVID, it was unbelievable. And then it took a little bit of dip after COVID, and I think we're coming out of it now. But it's a league where you better be on your toes. Doesn't matter who the opponent is, Friday or Saturday night, because you're going to be in for a real game.
I coached in the St. Laurent Clarkson series, which is crazy. Back in those days, Appleton and Walker Arena was not civilized, as you know.
Yeah.
I've watched my son play in the Colgate-Cornell rivalry, which is off the charts cuckoo crazy, especially at Liner Rink. You do Harvard-Yale, and you've been doing it for a long time. Take us inside a Harvard-Yale weekend.
Well, I mean, it's a big game traditionally, right? I mean, they're Yale's rival in everything, and they have been for over 200 years. So it's not about us. It's not about our team. It's about the tradition and the history of both schools. And, it's something you always remember. I'll remember my first game, my first win against Harvard as a player. It's a big deal.
What's the plan? You staying on the track? You're going to take a little meandering walk around? Are you going to stay and keep working? What's the plan for Keith Allain?
My plan right now, it's Wednesday. We've got Clarkson on Friday night, St. Lawrence on Saturday. We had practice this morning. It was a great one. I love planning practice. I love running practice. I'm looking forward to running practice tomorrow. And hopefully we can have a good game on Friday night. That's my plan.
You make the league better. You make your school better. You make your players better. And I'm telling you right now, I had a chance to compete against you. I had a chance to broadcast your games. I had a chance to watch you coach. This has been awesome that you would take the time, Keith. Thank you so much for doing this. It means a lot.
I appreciate all your comments, Pierre, and I always enjoy seeing you and hanging out with you. So thank you.
This has been another edition of ECAC Hockey Decision Makers. Thank you, Keith Allain.